This is an AI-generated automatic translation. Dear friends, welcome to the launch of GeneXus Next. Each time we make a release, the process of building a release starts and ends with the same question. What for? What for is the most important component for us. And from that, we build the version. And when we finish, we check whether we fulfill that what for. In this case, it is very clear what for. If there is something, the sign in the current times is what is happening as of November 2022 with the launch of ChatGPT is that AI is invading the world. But that process of AI invading the world has been very, very uneven. On one hand, what's very clear is that for end users, the adoption has been tremendous. Everybody in my family, all my children, all the students, older people, etc., everybody use ChatGPT or any other generative artificial intelligence engine for all kinds of queries, tasks in their everyday, for writing text, for creating content, etc. However, there is one particular fact. Just as the adoption of generative AI in consumers was tremendously successful, the use of generative artificial intelligence in companies, in the enterprise, has been much, much slower. And that what for is the one we want to attack. That is, how can we make it so that companies can adopt artificial intelligence at a much faster pace than they are doing now? So the first thing we started trying to answer was the what for, why. Even though adoption among end consumers was very fast, it wasn't the same within companies in the enterprise space. Well, we could define it with a concept that comes from military terms called the fog of war, which is the concept that there is such a high level of uncertainty that decision-making freezes. If I'm in a big company, I have to make a decision to adopt AI. I have to make a huge set of decisions, each of them quite complex and quite difficult to know whether I'm making the right decision or not. Which supplier am I going to use, or do I have to use? There are, 20 or 30 suppliers in the world or more. And all of a sudden, large language models, LLM, there's probably over 200 or something like that. Which one of those do I have to use? I have to worry about security because the people, the company's employees, will be handling sensitive and confidential information. That information, if it is going to go outside, it can be misused. How do I make sure that the LLMs don't hallucinate and create detailed reports that I then deliver to clients containing false or misleading information? How do I make sure that everyone has access to the company's internal data and that there is no conflict? Let's say I want to know my salary, but I can't know my coworker's salary. There are so many decisions to be made that many times companies remain frozen. They remain waiting. They remain in a wait-and-see situation, waiting for the fog of war to descend. Our promise at GeneXus has always been to ensure that in those moments of the fog of war, instead of people freezing and being unable to make decisions, what we want to do is that they can make decisions, and if they make a mistake, they can quickly change, in a way to generate prototypes or projects so that it can work. Our response to this over the past 3 years has been to create a new platform called Globant Enterprise AI, which somehow tries to solve all these previous problems that I was telling you about. So that's the first thing. GeneXus Next is not alone. It comes with a companion by its side. The companion is a platform called Globant Enterprise AI, which helps us with the issue of adoption of AI in companies. But also companies have another set of decisions that they don't know how to make. One that I was telling him was that fog of war of who do I use, who do I marry? But there's also another line, which is the line of what do I want to use it for? What I want to use AI for in this company is also a series of decisions that are quite difficult to decide. Let's say I want to use it to automate customer contact. I want to use it for something internal, etc., etc. Again, what we want to do, and this is a fundamental component of GeneXus Next, is that I can test those new uses of artificial intelligence in companies in the GeneXus way, fulfilling our function of being technology agnostic. And as usual, they can test it with any type of LLM, with any type of vector database provider and so on. Also, with a form of rapid change, meaning that you can test these ideas and see which one works and which one doesn't. That is sort of provide a very large set of options and then take which one really works and move forward. So, well, that is the first point, the first what for. In the end, what we want is that GeneXus Next help the GeneXus community so they can use it within their client companies and adopt AI more quickly. But also, this AI invasion that I was telling you about brings a second quite interesting component that is very relevant for us, the GeneXus community. Until before generative AI became a widely known and popular concept, code generation faced enormous skepticism every time we showed someone new what GeneXus was. The first thing they asked was, I want to see the code. Basically, the idea of a machine automatically generating code raised a lot of doubts. Everyone was skeptical about it. The first thing they wanted to see was the code. We somehow knew that at first that happened, but over time, people stopped looking at the code generated by GeneXus altogether, because the code generated by GeneXus is deterministic, solid, and capable of generating 100% of an application. Anyway, in the process of GeneXus adoption, there was a doubt. Well, that has changed. Now, since the launch of ChatGPT just a short time ago, everyone has some story about making a little program over the weekend with Python or without knowing anything about Python to do grocery shopping or things like that. That is, it became somehow socially acceptable for machines to generate code. So on one hand, that's good for GeneXus because what we've been doing is now much more widely accepted than it used to be. But there's a slightly more complicated side to it. The code generated by generative AI is what we could call probabilistic code, code that can't really be explained. Lines of code that are probably 90% correct. As an individual productivity tool, if I have someone to help me write part of the code, that's fine, that's quite handy. Now, if what I want to automatically generate is an enterprise system with all the security, observability, and other requirements that an enterprise company needs, it's impossible to rely on probabilistically generated code. For putting it in black and white, there's simply no way I could automatically generate a full banking core, a system that probably has at least 500 million lines of code just by using generative AI or a probabilistic way. What is the way? The way we have used, the deterministic way. Essentially, at the time of generating code, that the way we have is the way to generate code in enterprise. That's not to say that GeneXus Next doesn't use generative AI capabilities. What we're going to do is use all the understanding that generative AI provides about what people want and how I could define that within the knowledge base of GeneXus, using assistants and using agents that are going to be helping me with that within GeneXus. What is the effect of what I was telling you that brings this popularity of code generation? Well, I think that somehow the category where we are, which is called low-code, is going to evolve, it's going to be redefined, and I think its name will eventually change. This is something that I have been talking about informally for quite some time with Gastón Milano, and my bet is that it will have a new name. My bet on a new name is that it will be Agentic Low-Code, that it will be low-code, but with agents. What I want is that from now on, I not only want to write little code, but I want to have agents that are part of the development of the construction of the system. For example, to give you something concrete, I would like every Monday morning to have an agent that is checking all the security issues in the code. So, well, that's the new stage. We're moving into a new category shift, and we want to be at the forefront of that transformation. To summarize, folks, we are doing GeneXus Next to fulfill our most sophisticated promise to the GeneXus community, which is to be future-proof. What we want is for the GeneXus community to be able to help their companies adopt artificial intelligence faster than the rest. That's the big challenge of the times right now, and this is our answer. Dear friends, thank you very much. We're very happy. Let's move on to the roundtable, where we'll be talking about all of this in more detail.
Thank you, Nicolás. Now we are at this table with Gastón, Gustavo, and Federico to talk a little more in depth about GeneXus Next. After Nicolás's intro, What I want to know is what kind of applications or solutions to build now in this context.
Well, before we get into the specific subject of the question, let me tell the community we are releasing a new version of GeneXus Next, and I have great joy with that. It's a version that we've been working on for a long time. A key point, as Nicolás said, is to answer exactly that question. Every time we start developing a new version of GeneXus, we ask ourselves, what are the solutions we need to build? What is the industry asking for? What kind of applications? And going back to what you were asking me, what kind of applications and solutions do we need to create? What do the industries need across the different sectors and markets where our community operates around the world? Well, it has certain complexities, if you will, accidental, in addition to the complexities that the business itself has. In general, when there is a problem intrinsic to the business, health, legal, financial, retail, and so on. And there are problems that are not of the industry itself. They are problems that are often brought by the technology itself. For example, many times I go to places and ask whether now, after ChatGPT, things have become easier. After ChatGPT, to mark that milestone. Actually, after the rise of generative models, after the boom, has it become easier? Is it easier or more difficult to build mission-critical systems now? The truth is, the systems that we are going to have to build are of a much, much higher level of accidental complexity. Why? Well, because these will be systems where from the very beginning we start by asking, what is the artificial intelligence model we need to use? If we're going to use internal data, what data are we talking about? Which databases will we use? And which vector databases should we rely on? What cloud provider am I going to have to work with? What is the orchestration approach for managing all of these models am I going to have to use? Because it's clear that the world going forward is going to be multi-model. It's going to be multi-agent. It's going to be multi-framework with different frameworks from Microsoft, from OpenAI, from Anthropic, from Google, from Salesforce, and so on. There is not going to be only one provider or one type of model or one type of framework. And that generates a lot of complexities when building the systems that we are going to build. And you will say to me, well, you talked about all the complexities, but what are the systems we are going to build? And well, that is something we are going through and reimagining today. The first thing is that we'll be building them within the community. Where will those experiences lead? And second, what I do know about these systems is that they are of a much higher degree of technical complexity.
A little while ago, Nicolás talked about a new category GeneXus is spearheading, Agentic Low-Code. For those of you who are a few years older than me, GeneXus went through several categories from case tools, RAD, rapid application development, to low-code. Now we say that we are in a new category, Agentic Low-Code. Can you explain a little more about what that means?
Sure, I think this is a term, as Nicolás said, that's been discussed with Gustavo, with Fede, and Gabriel brought it to the table. Gabriel Simonet brought up the topic because, well, how do we really feel that low-code has evolved over time, influencing the way we design, model, and understand software creation? In various aspects, like building by generating code directly from structured knowledge. That's how we even conceive low-code, as a way to translate ideas into functioning systems seamlessly. Not everyone sees it that way, of course, but that's a bit of an understatement. Especially now with the full capability of the agents brought by generative AI, which elevate automation to an entirely new level. When you look at ChatGPT, what you can ask it to do, how much it understands, that you can even upload text, audio, images, and so on. And with that, I can then come to certain conclusions, and from there I can build on it, is what we now include as agentic. The term agentic comes hand in hand with the ability to automatically, based on knowledge, synthesize what the GeneXus model is and combine it with artificial intelligence to create software. Generative artificial intelligence with symbolic artificial intelligence. Instead of going from point A to point B, directly with generative AI itself, have an intermediate point where I know that from there I get perfectly to the final solution. We reach the model of the final solution before going directly into the code. This gives us the predictability needed to do what Nicolás was mentioning, to be able to generate safely a core banking system with millions of lines of code. The other day we were at the Total event and I found myself thinking, really, artificial intelligence built a core banking system? But it was not generative AI, it was symbolic AI. Now, if we combine the two, we're going to be able to make a core banking system that is predictable, repeatable, and in turn, we will be able to expand with orchestration through generative AI. Many of the areas that are essential for the banking industry, but what I'm telling you also applies to every other industry as well.
In this world of many LLMs, lots of vibe coding platforms and lots of co-pilots emerging everywhere, what is the true value that GeneXus brings? What is the real differential that GeneXus has?
Well, the differential points exactly to what I mentioned before. The true differential lies in actually being able to build mission-critical systems in a repeatable, reliable way. Not just a web page, not just a simple application. Mission-critical applications means that business rules must always be executed correctly, and that in my data modeling, I must always be able to access it and generate it correctly every time. Without going any further, today all the frontier models, the most advanced ones, and this is something we've confirmed through internal benchmarks, cannot generate a normalization as GeneXus generates it. It works with one table, it works with two tables, it works with three tables, with four. It already starts to struggle, depending on the number of attributes, relationships, and with many functional dependencies, it really begins to have non-trivial issues with data access. We can't fully rely on GenAI for that. When it comes to data access or math, we can't play roulette. No company, no enterprise would ever want to take that risk. In a banking course, I don't want to play roulette by doing math. That's one part of it, the precision of what they do, the effectiveness of what we want to achieve. When I generate judgments, I don't want to have security issues. But on the other hand, is that if I'm asked to repeat exactly what I just did, I can repeat it. And if they tell me to repeat it with some change, a small or medium-sized change, I can do it, really preserving what evolution is all about. This is a unique differentiator that simply doesn't exist anywhere else in the market today, something unique to GeneXus.
And the last thing I want to ask you, I understood that GeneXus Next brings all the symbolic artificial intelligence and at the same time, the generative artificial intelligence. If we add to that and integrate Globant Enterprise AI, which allows us to build agentic solutions, why do we say that GeneXus is part of Globant Enterprise AI and vice versa?
Well, this comes from something important we always say every time we start a new version. What is it that we really need to build? And how we build it. We already talked about how we build it, what we are going to do. An agentic IDE, and now Federico and Gustavo. Let's hope that
they can show it.
And we're going to go to the substance, and we're going to be showing with examples and everything. On the other hand, we focus on what truly needs to be built. For example, during the 1980s, systems were mostly monolithic, with a single access point to a central repository using green screens or command line or whatever. Then we configured those kinds of things directly in GeneXus, and that's how we allowed to evolve systems. Now, as I was telling you before, what we have to build today in terms of infrastructure to make GeneXus work in a cohesive way with everything that already exists is of such an extremely high level of complexity that we decided to do it on a platform that provides all of that together at once without having to start from scratch. Without having to say, well, I need a vector base, I need to define an agent that follows this protocol, I need to define projects, and for each project users, the governance of all that I need to scale it, that I need that infrastructure to eventually be multi-region. And I'm serving my system in different parts, in Europe, in Latin America, in the United States, or wherever. I need different models and so on. All of that, what we did was consolidate it into a platform we call Globant Enterprise AI, and it's like the runtime environment for these agents that I'm going to be building, that new layer that will be able to be deployed everywhere GeneXus has always allowed deployment, seamlessly integrating with the current enterprise systems. I will be able to easily attach all these components so that I don't have to be orchestrating them, monitoring them, and eventually making mistakes that could potentially become very costly in an enterprise application. That's why we created Globant Enterprise AI with a strong and deliberate focus on deeply understanding what the market needed and what mission-critical systems required for this agentic era.
In a nutshell, GeneXus Next together with Globant Enterprise AI, enables organizations to build the applications required in this context while simultaneously deploying AI-powered applications in the cloud of their choice using the LLMs of their choice. We could say that GeneXus Next, together with Globant Enterprise AI, is the combination of both. It allows customers to have a solid platform that, at the same time, enables us to deliver on our future-proof promise.
I like that you explain some things much more clearly than I do. The summary is truly outstanding.
So our customers will be able to maintain and evolve whatever they build today well into the future?
Exactly.
Well, now we're going to move on to better understand how we build those applications that Gastón mentioned. For that, we're going to talk with Federico and Gustavo. Today we are releasing the first version of a new edition of GeneXus. Tell me, Fede, why GeneXus Next is so important for you?
Well, it is undoubtedly very important because, as Gastón just said, it is the result of the effort and the hard work of several years of a very big team. Creating a very useful version, that is why we are very proud of what we are releasing. And it also brings very interesting technical features. For example, we now have a truly multi-platform IDE. You can use it on Windows just as always, but also on Linux and even on Mac OS. Yes, on Macs too, offering full flexibility across all major operating systems. And another innovation we have in terms of the IDE's technology itself is that it now runs on 64 bits, enabling greater performance, stability, etc. Is another of the characteristics that we were often asked for. And finally, my favorite feature, GeneXus Next also comes with a dark mode.
That's so great.
That's your favorite.
That one has been requested many times.
Funny enough, people are requesting white mode now.
Why don't we have light mode?
We will have it. We will have dark mode soon.
Gustavo, tell me why GeneXus Next is important for our customers.
Mo, to provide this technology that allows our customers to develop applications in the most efficient way possible, which is the agentic way. Agentic applications, to put it in a nutshell, are tremendously important. So for me, it's a challenge and super fun to be in this moment because this edition is amazing to learn and a joy to explore and use to create truly innovative things.
It's what customers need today.
Yes, and we're providing it to customers. I love it.
What does it bring, or what are the features of GeneXus Next? Tell me the three most important ones.
Well, let's see. Well, I think the first one is that it is an agentic IDE. When I say it is an agentic IDE, it is a GeneXus IDE that has an agent or an architect that we know as Nexa, which actually coordinates the work of a number of artificial intelligence agents that help you in the development. That is, you first create a solution, and with these same agents, you can nurture, evolve that solution with more knowledge. Even without the need to know the syntax or master many parts of GeneXus, because the agent itself, or Nexa as we know it, knows a lot about GeneXus modeling and capabilities. So it's like developing with a senior GeneXus developer right there by your side, who is directly creating knowledge to the knowledge base, or even explaining concepts to you, or helping you, or giving you suggestions for implementations. I think that's the first thing. Having an agentic IDE means having someone who develops alongside you. You are not alone.
But then, if I interpret correctly, with Nexa, I won't have to know GeneXus.
Well, I think you're not going to have to know that much. And the first thing to understand in this entire era of artificial intelligence is that, in a way, the questions are becoming even more important than the answers. At the end of the day, you're always going to think you know what your intention is, what your question is, how to express that question.
But it will be easier.
Totally. Then the answer will be given by Nexa, let's say, or it will help you to give that answer. But also, with GeneXus, we've always said that the most important thing is to know your business. Technology comes afterward, as an anecdote, so to speak, as the implementation of that knowledge. Well, at this moment, it is much more relevant to understand what your business is and what are the opportunities to develop applications. Because on the implementation side, you have an incredible, very powerful ally, an assistant, an agent, an architect called Nexa, who helps you tremendously throughout the entire implementation process. So the questions are much more relevant and the proposals are much more relevant than the answers.
Well, are you going to show me GeneXus Next?
Now we have, as we are looking at the GeneXus IDE, this is GeneXus Next. Here on the right side, we have access to Nexa, where you can directly ask for help. Nexa, as Gustavo just said, is our agent that helps and assists us.
The developer's best friend.
That's right. And here we can be as specific or talk to her at as high a level as we want. In this case, for example, I'm asking her to assist me in the creation of a domain because I already know that this is my intention. So I talk to Nexa in terms of GeneXus objects and everything else we're already familiar with. But I can also ask Nexa to help me create the application structures, and for that I simply ask it to create entities for a specific business model I have. So here we are going to start by creating a transaction category to define categories that we are going to use later on in this travel agency system project. And well, as we can see here, it quickly created a transaction structure with the information I provided. But then, as I continue using it more frequently and intuitively, I can ask it to create more complex structures that are deeply related to the structures it has already created previously. Behind all of this, there isn't just one agent, there are many, as Gustavo mentioned earlier. We have Nexa, who acts as the intelligent orchestrator of it all, the architect who understands my true intention. And once it manages to identify what that intention is, Nexa relies on a set of specialized experts, each one of them specialized in carrying out some of the more specialized tasks of application development and modeling within GeneXus. For example, we have an expert who knows deeply about data structures, another who fully understands the procedural language of GeneXus, and another who specializes in advanced navigation techniques. We have agents that are also experts for screen design and more agents. And all of these experts live within what is Globant Enterprise AI, for which we also have several internal benchmarks that we use carefully to determine which artificial intelligence model is the most suitable, effective, and efficient for each of these specialized experts. And that way we can also adjust the training parameters, we can vary the temperature a little bit, and test which one performs better overall.
Honestly, the truth is that the amazing work done by Federico's team has been truly fantastic and inspiring to see. Nexa is fantastic. I've seen its evolution, just as Fede mentioned, starting with creating a domain, then wanting to create transactions. The model contexts were small back then, so we constantly struggled against the limitations of the model's context. That's part of the past now. Today, we're truly working with an agent. It's not just a simple call to an LLM where I tell it to do something. This agent has the knowledge base as its context, and that's where the real value comes in. Because when you start working in a different way, when you begin by writing, which many people still don't do, today, writing a document makes things much easier. I can add that document to the knowledge base, and from there, give it to Nexa and say, okay, I want to guide the process through this document. And without going any further, I can even implement a completely new protocol. That the other day, I was doing it in a commerce protocol agent knowledge base, which has to implement APIs, it has to maintain sessions on data, it has to be exposed, and it has to do callbacks. And Nexa created the transactions for me. It created the procedures for me, generated the APIs, built the domains with their enumerations, and exposed them externally. Honestly, the work that's been done up to this point has been truly fantastic. Sorry, Fede, I interrupted your story.
And here, as we can see, the result of all this was the creation of all these structures. Here, what we're seeing here is something that was progressively built over time. Progressively, as the Nexa assistant was advancing in applying the requirements that I was indicating to it. So, the final result was achieving these structures with dependencies, foreign keys, and so on, and besides all of them were created automatically.
What I understand you're saying is that all the intentions you express to Nexa are synthesized into a knowledge base. From there, as those words evolve into formalized knowledge, within that knowledge base, they remain equally valid, whether the purpose is to add value or to preserve the asset as part of our client's digital assets within that same knowledge base.
Yes, correct.
Nexa is a very powerful instrument to populate and continuously enrich the knowledge base.
To leverage or enhance the developer. So the first feature is oriented to GeneXus Next, which is an agent designed to make developers' everyday life easier and simpler.
A GeneXus customer today already has a knowledge base to work on. So When I have that knowledge base, sometimes the challenge is just to evolve, as Fede showed just right now, to improve or change, to improve the data model, and sometimes the challenges are much more specific. For example, if you give me a minute, I will show you what I'm talking about. I could, on a knowledge base, in this case, I follow the example of Fede from the travel agency. Actually, my intention is to evolve. What I have is perfect, but I want to create a REST API on top of that. I want to publish this maintaining the same structures that I have, and I want to publish an API. Nexa is able to tell me, well, what you need to do is these changes. These are the transactions. These are the entities that I identified. What you would have to do is a procedure that would publish as REST an API. She even says to me, well, this is what you would have to do, and if you want, I can do it for you. Specify me a little bit more about which objects you want, about which entities of your knowledge base you want to generate an API. And when I specify that, it goes and creates it by itself. So, a little bit along the lines Gastón was saying, it is not only to create knowledge of the data structures, but he has such a deep knowledge of GeneXus that it knows an API is an object API in GeneXus that has to have procedures that go through the database and return that information in a format that can be understood by whoever is going to get that information. It is understandable by whoever is going to get that API. I mean, in a way, it is not only thinking about the data model, but thinking about someone who has an API first. If you have a knowledge base in GeneXus, if you have an API first, you have a very easy and straightforward way to provide an API if you ask it nicely to Nexa, because all that complex coding and embedded knowledge can be generated and rendered in just a couple of minutes. Well, maybe a little more than 2 minutes, let's say around 5 minutes.
Gisela, today you asked a question. You said, well, whether or not I have to stop learning GeneXus. Actually, GeneXus, the language that Nexa generates, is an essential intermediate point between intention and executable code. If Gustavo really asked you, well, I have to do all the work for the travel agency, the data, the APIs, and everything else involved. Actually, what will be shown at the end is what's happening today, that a huge amount of code is being generated, let's say, with countless little tricks and things happening underneath the surface. And I really have to go and supervise that myself. It's much more complex than monitoring what GeneXus does today, because I already know, for example, that I don't need to monitor select statements. I know I don't have to monitor SQL injection. I know I don't have to monitor cross-site scripting on the UX side. So going through that intermediate language also gives us that additional level of supervision, what some are calling executable specifications or similar related concepts. And we've already anticipated that. From that point on, I'll have to supervise much less. I'll still need to monitor, of course, but whatever Nexa generates for me is something I can trust. But let's not forget, as we mentioned earlier, that it's maybe about 98% accurate overall. So I'll still need to supervise and carefully correct a few things, but in a language that I know is completely deterministic. This is agentic low-code, meaning that from the agentic process, something is generated that I will then supervise, and that's the low-code part.
So we've been looking at the first pillar, which is focused on the IDE, aimed at giving developers agents to build applications more easily. Tell me, what is the second pillar of GeneXus Next?
Well, Gisela, the first thing to clarify with GeneXus Next with respect to the applications we generate is that everything that already comes from GeneXus we still have in GeneXus Next. That is, we have Java, Net, Android, iOS, Angular. In the same way that we maintain the knowledge base as the core at the architectural level, we also maintain the deterministic code generators. It's not about breaking everything and starting from scratch. I've sometimes heard people talk about software waves as if each one replaces the previous one. In reality, I like to think they're more like strata. Strata as in geological layers, so to speak, where each layer is built on top of the previous one. So I think the first important message is that users will have everything they had before, essentially the same generators and the same approach. And the second part is the agentic one, which, if you will, may not be the most attention-grabbing or sexy topic for everybody. But in a way, I think we can't minimize this part because agents extend and enhance many of the powerful features we've been offering and refining for years. Maybe Federico would like to share something about the agentic story there.
Yes, actually, before that, I'd also like to mention that among the exciting new features we can now design, model, and integrate within GeneXus applications is the topic of vector databases that Gastón mentioned earlier, which is very important. For some time now, PostgreSQL, SQL Server, and MySQL have supported vector data types in their tables. So, in GeneXus, we decided to add support for the embedding data type as an attribute type, which allows us to build applications that can perform semantic searches, or also applications that can use vectors to calculate distances and different metrics calculated dynamically based on the semantic relevance of that query. For that, we also have an example that I wanted to show you. Here we have the travel agency application, which is the one that we're using for reference. We have this design, which is the Angular front end, which, as you can see, is with a very nice design. We have this search field right here at the top of the website. From this field, we can look up all kinds of attractions that we might be interested in. It's designed to help us explore different options for the trip we're planning. So for example, here we search for museums in France, and it gives us a filtered list of the different types of museums available for visit in this beautiful country. And this was achieved by intelligently using the calculated relevance of each search result in relation to the original query. As you may have seen, when we modeled the structures, in no case did we put in the description or anything that it was in France. And here in the search, we are not searching strictly by the country, but we are intelligently using that context. Here's another case, another example. What we're doing is searching for attractions at high altitude. Nowhere did we indicate that it was at high altitude. And yet, here we can see that it shows us several different options. For example, we have Mount Fuji, Brazil's Sugarloaf Mountain, and a few more options.
I loved it.
This is a good thing about the semantic search. I can think of several patterns to look for where to go on my own vacation without having to be so precise in what I'm looking for. I think there is something very interesting about the type of applications that you can make, which is already going towards agentics. Federico was referring more to artificial intelligence, or more precisely to the advanced embedding data type feature. But there's also another part, the new era or the agentic era, which is about being able to define within the knowledge base an agent object. And what this agent object basically does is combine a prompt section where I define the intention and explain what I want it to do, a context section where I specify what data it will work with and under what conditions, and finally a tooling section where I define the tools it can use, for example, allowing it to access other information sources, consume external services, operate a small robot, or even turn on a light when needed. So the most exciting part coming up is the agent object, because it's something you define directly within the knowledge base. You put that knowledge together in this kind of agent object, and I have it as a native object of the knowledge base itself that I can invoke, I can integrate as any other, as a procedure, as a panel, whatever. So in a way, that's really what unleashes the full creative and agentic power in modern application development.
Yes. Gustavo, sorry to cut in there, because what you were saying about having a real agent object inside the knowledge base and being able to define it is one of the things where I believe we've made a huge simplification, so that the accidental complexity I mentioned at the beginning, how to combine things, is reduced. Because that simple example Federico showed, being able to tag each attraction or each trip with something vector-based and then query it, illustrates the point. Decisions like which knowledge base to use, which vector database to choose, and so on, all of that is hidden behind the agent object. On the one hand, we all understand that. It's easier to grasp something simple like an agent having a context, as you mentioned, and that I can take action through certain procedures I have in the knowledge base. And really, one of the main things that companies are not being able to move forward with today is exactly because of the complex connection to their data and to their existing enterprise and mission-critical systems. Why? Because every communication involves authentication, information privacy, and so on. To perform the same kind of actions, and in the combination of agents as well, I can automatically tell one of these agents we've defined here within GeneXus that it can use other agents. And when we put that into play, it is no longer just accessing data, but we put several agents to work with each other. We are creating dynamic processes in a certain way. There are certain things that still remain to be seen in terms of what the best approach will be, but at GeneXus we have both ways of saying, okay, I want to get from point A to point B. I can use a set of agents for them to decide how to get there, what's the best way to get from point A to point B. test it, and if I see that it doesn't work, I can diagram it. In the workflow diagrams today that we have in GeneXus, Next agents can participate now. So I can do something guided with a process, or I can do something like say, well, get together guys and figure out how to get from A to B. Then we don't get into either the discussion of what's the best way to do it, because you really have to evaluate in each step for each reality what is the best way to do it. My suggestion, start simple, start with a single agent. If you see that you need to abstract some part, start with 2 or 3 agents working together. Try to trust that LLMs are very good orchestrators in many points, and if you see that they don't orchestrate it very well, then we can just move on to drawing a diagram or flow, and all these things can be done within GeneXus Next.
Can we see it?
We can see this with an example, Federico.
Yes, I was going to say that there is no doubt that the combination of prompts, context, and tools generates an infinite amount of possibilities. Here, if you let me, I will show you a very simple case that we integrated in the travel agency application. Here, what we're going to do is work in the travel agency back office, where we need to upload the attractions for the destinations we're interested in offering trips to. What we are going to do is to type the name of an attraction that exists in real life. So we have an agent that can access publicly available information on the internet to automatically load the description details for that attraction. Indeed, it provisions us an image of it. It accesses through tools to information of what categories I have in my business system to be able to categorize this attraction in a suitable way, and also tell me in which country it is located and in which city.
Let's see if I got it right. What you are saying is I access public information and populate my private, let's say closed, database with that public data. But it's not a direct copy. I process it with other agents that, for example, classify it. And the classification they assign isn't a universal or arbitrary one. It's a classification that's more relevant to me, to my specific needs, because I have my own private database. And the geographic information seems pretty clear to me. That's the direction we're heading in. So it's combining everything together, information from both worlds, so to speak, within the data entered in this case.
All done with the agent object?
Yeah, that's right. Going back to what you mentioned earlier, the classic GeneXus transaction with all its power to generate relational databases and applications now combines with the agentic capability to handle new scenarios. In this case, that means calling an agent object within the knowledge base.
And how do you call it?
It is just a call, nothing more.
That's it.
A value, let's say. It's a natural part of GeneXus development.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes when we talk about agents, we lose these cases, don't we? Saying, well, I have to put agents, so the first thing I think is that I have to put an assistant on the right side of the screen chatting, right? No, when in fact...
Well, we have some of those now.
Sure, we're going to look at them now because that's what everyone is waiting for. But these kinds of examples, let's say, those are the obvious ones, let's say. The obvious ones, and then I'm sure in transition we're going to go through them. But these things we're showing, and that's why I was asking, how do we call it? Because maybe someone in the community doesn't know yet, how do I call an agent? Well, I call it just like a proc. So it has inputs and outputs, and I can call it from anywhere I would call any other proc.
What we are showing here, anyone can download that example. If you want to know specifically what agent is used and what it's called, see it.
Because I think that sometimes it is not so clear what I was saying of combining these agents and putting them in different flows. They make it so that certain things, if we think about them that way, as specific smaller tasks, allow us to start incorporating agentic capabilities into our systems without having to say, I'm going to expose something to the public where you have to have other kinds of evaluations, etc., etc., etc. And start with things that really are of great value, because the LLM is a very good translator. As you were saying, I translate what is in the world eventually into things that I know how to handle, to a taxonomy or whatever it is that I know how to handle. And I store it in my database. And I kind of zoom in on the information that I have with information from the world and expose it to my clients.
Without a doubt, the scenarios are endless. You can generate summaries or expand descriptions, do a sentiment analysis. There are tons and tons of possibilities.
Yes, I remember that Nicolás said some time ago, the issue is also the opportunity in the text. Even though we always focus on numbers, anything that is textual, you have a wonderful tool to make the most of it.
By the way, at this stage, let's try to focus not on the numbers, because if we want to focus on the numbers, let's give people another tool and let's focus on the text, images, videos in the multimodality that these agents have.
And here I am going to show you a last one of how to make agents now using our Nexa agent, because all this about agents is something new. And well, as you were saying, how do I call it? How do I write it? What is the syntax to write an agent and so on? We have all the documentation in the wiki, which has a lot of details. And here Nexa can consume that information. It's a tool that Nexa has available.
In other words, Nexa accesses the wiki, let's say, so she knows how to write.
So you are telling me that you are going to use the Nexa agent to build another agent?
Exactly. So here we are looking at how Nexa suggests how the agent I am requesting should be. It is giving me a proposal of how I could write it and tells me, if you want, I can add it to you.
Yes, I do.
Upon confirmation, here is the final result. Then we can use Nexa itself to generate new powerful agents. And this for me is an enormous value. On the one hand, for existing GeneXus users that can now explore the features and learn how to use them and so on. But it is also a huge value for new GeneXus users who do not know what the GeneXus language is like, how to model one feature or another. Nexa can help the users and teach them how to achieve these objectives.
And here only one comment, this is global. Everyone talks about agents, but there is no single definition of an agent, no single language of agents. So you can do it in a JavaScript framework. One way, the other way is, there are 800,000 DSLs, let's call them. We think we came up with a very good, very simple definition in GeneXus.
Very specific.
Yes, very concrete towards what is wanted and very integrated to what people already have today in the knowledge base. We did not make a great syntactic invention, so you can call it as a proc, you can call it from anywhere, and we hope you will use it a lot for your systems.
Gustavo, do you have any case you can tell me about the integration of GeneXus with artificial intelligence, with Globant Enterprise AI?
Yes, there are several cases. It depends a bit on the context. Somehow, the potential of GeneXus Next and Globant Enterprise AI tools is enormous. And beyond that, reality, as we were saying today, is expanding from numbers to letters. So in a way, you look at the amount of opportunities, it opens up an ocean of opportunities to apply this technology in different scenarios.
Tell me one.
We have participated in some of them in several projects, either with GeneXus Next and Globant Enterprise AI. There is one, for example, which is a customer that has an investment validation process. So what they receive as information historically, they always did it this way. They receive a folder containing a number of printed invoices or a photo of a handwritten invoice and an Excel spreadsheet listing the details of each invoice. And someone would take all that information and manually process it and say, this invoice is valid, this invoice is not valid, this invoice is correct, this invoice is not correct, etc. with the acceptance criteria of the type of expense that was being evaluated. Obviously, this took days to validate each of those batches of information that came in. So what was implemented is an application that processes or pre-processes all that information, and well, that Excel spreadsheet ends up being enriched with which agent interpreted each of the invoices, acknowledges that it is an invoice, acknowledges what is being spent, and somehow says, well, this invoice is valid, it is not valid, in a kind of red, green, or yellow traffic light. So again, it is not the agent that does everything, the application does everything. It is all combined in a combined development platform. It's a bit like Gastón was saying. I also can't have a piece of each because I put myself at a lot of risk of loss. I expose myself to many risks of loss of information, security, etc. So there is a specific case, of course. Now, there are countless cases we have participated in and many more to come.
I believe that there still remains an important third point to be addressed in this roundtable. In this new context of agentic applications, a new concern arises, which is that when you go to the enterprise world, all these agentic applications have to be done in a secure environment, contained with proper governance. What do we offer for that?
Well, what we have is that the applications that we generate with GeneXus can be deployed in the traditional way as we are used to, either in a cloud environment or in our own infrastructures or however our customers want. And then what is added to this is the integration with Globant Enterprise AI, which becomes part of the runtime of our application. The agents that we develop in our GeneXus Next knowledge base are published and executed within Globant Enterprise AI. Then our application, when it needs to access any of them, consumes it through a direct invocation. And if the agent that I defined needs access to tools to be able to perform its function, it will return to my application the instruction to execute that tool that will be executed locally within the context of my application. In other words, Globant Enterprise AI is part of the runtime of our application.
Right, yes. Somehow it has to be a very controlled environment with a lot of governance. I have to be able to see every request, every user, how much I'm investing, spending, that I have safeguards that protect me from information leaking out or inappropriate responses to the environment. All that sophistication, Gastón was talking about it, all that sophistication is encapsulated in Globant Enterprise AI. So the most secure, governable, certain place to run, not just cross-platform, but with all those non-functional attributes that you need, is Globant Enterprise AI. So let's say that's where the runtime comes in.
For example, in this runtime, the truth is that with agents, we are moving towards a multi-agent world, as I was saying today. And for that multi-agent world, you also have to be prepared. It is not going to be your agent, even if it is a retail agent, or no matter how big you are, you will surely have to interoperate with other agents. So when you define an agent in GeneXus and deploy it in Globant Enterprise AI, by default, it has an API. By default, it is agent to agent. That is, it supports the agent to agent protocol. That means that this agent, you can use it from your application, but you are also in the world of being able to interoperate or have others interoperate with you in the form of agentics. This is not minor. And if you want to expose your platforms or agents, for example, as a tool to another place, to other agents, you can also expose your APIs, for example, as MCPs. So MCP, which is a tooling protocol, and so on. When you start to add those little things that you have to do, make an agent, put it as an API, that API has to have security by token or security with OAuth, with different protocols, that this API then has to implement, let's call certain payloads for agent to agent or for other types of protocols that may appear, or that your e-commerce complies with the new agentic commerce protocol or the newer agentic payment protocol as well. All those types of protocols come built in with the components you're deploying in that interface. Since everything has become so much more complex, we created something cohesive, so you don't have to spend time configuring all those things yourself. And that Globant Enterprise AI, you can put it, as Federico said, on-premise in the different possible clouds with your cloud provider, and close, let's say, to your data as much as you want. You can start as a service, or you can continue in each of the flavors because it's done as infrastructure, as code.
No doubt about it. Let's see, here behind all this is Globant Enterprise AI, which is where I can then access to see what is really going on inside my application. I can go into the Globant Enterprise AI console and see, for example, what is happening with the incoming requests. I can see what users are accessing. I can see how the token consumption of this application is coming. What is the cache, the size of the expenditure that is occurring. I have all the information I need readily available, which allows me to take action with confidence and make informed decisions about the adjustments that need to be made across this entire platform.
What we're going to be experiencing is that really that information is going to be crucial to the evolution of my system. In other words, I am really going to have to evaluate if I can lower the cost, whether I'm being effective or not out of this 90-something% that I'm giving you, how many questions I'm answering right, whether I'm really answering it right or not. And well, there we go to a world of evaluations instead of testing maybe, where we evaluate maybe many things in runtime that we used to do in design time. And for that, having the information is obviously crucial.
I have a quick question. Indeed, you were just speaking and it just suddenly occurred to me now. I could, in this chat that I have with travel agency, have the trace of the whole chat and know if it ended in a transaction, buying a ticket or a hotel or something. I mean, in a way I have with this, all the transactional cost that I had for consuming LLM, kept the information and all that. And at the same time, what is the conversion rate of those conversations?
Without a doubt, let's see. Through the information that we have available in Globant Enterprise AI, we can see all the requests that originated from a certain user, and we can also eventually hook as a tool from the agent to the transaction to confirm the purchase. And within our application, we can also access the history or a session identifier from that chat, which we can store as additional data for that purchase, allowing us to know not only whether that purchase was made through a conversation that originated in the chat, but also to clearly differentiate if it came directly through another channel or interaction.
What I'm getting at is that it's not just a technical traceability of the request and the token and the ID and all that, but it's a commercial traceability. I start a conversation here. It cost me all this. I had all this time, and in the end it ends up in a commercial transaction that has a certain value contribution. Somehow, having all the data makes it possible for you to build on what Gastón was saying, whether the agent works or not, whether it is fun is one thing, whether it is profitable is another.
Correct. Well, let me summarize what we were talking about. GeneXus Next, on the one hand, provides us with an agentic IDE so that we can learn much easier to develop using GeneXus, and at the same time, it also makes developers' lives easier. On the other hand, it allows us to build agentic solutions. All this in a controlled and secure environment thanks to Globant Enterprise AI.
Correct.
Is it a good summary?
Excellent.
Let's assume, Guskar, that we have convinced the customers that this is the opportunity and that we can provide them with a solution for their business. What should they do?
It's easy. The first thing they have to do is go to genexus.com/next. There you can download the IDE, you can download these examples that we were talking about. Have fun, learn by doing, discover GeneXus Next, Globant Enterprise AI and agentic software development, how it's built and what can be created with it. And after that experience that each person truly needs to go through themselves, turn around and look at their business and say, well, if this is the technology, if this is the state of the art, if this is what all this story of Globant Enterprise AI leads to, how can I use it in my business? I think that once you start playing the game, you begin to see the opportunities much more clearly. So in a way, that fog, that AI paralysis by analysis, slowly starts to lift and fade away, and you see a path and say, this is the way. So my genexus.com/next invitation, have fun and learning by doing.
Enjoy it. Well, to wrap things up, we have a 35-year history that stands as proof of how far we've come. We also have a concrete present, proudly offering our customers the ability to build the applications that the context requires. Now I want to know a little bit about how we see the future.
Well, the truth is we're already releasing so many exciting things today that for me are really meant to prepare our customers for the future. Of course, talking about the future is always risky, but there are certain things that I believe are already starting to happen. Let's begin with GeneXus Next. I think that at least in the near future, this combination of neurosymbolic AI that is combining intelligences, the combination of both artificial intelligences, symbolic AI, the one that existed from these 35 years with the new generative intelligence will be what powers Nexa, the core we've started to provide, along with a set of agents that we're developing around it to extend its capabilities that are part of Globant Enterprise AI and will be collaborating to build software faster and faster, which is our vision with future-proofing. Those agents are going to continue to work. And there's anything I can say on how they're going to continue to build software is going to be through agents and in turn using the knowledge base. They're going to accumulate more and more things into the knowledge base. Audio, video, text, all multimodal information. And from there, we will continue to build software. More and more that's going to be moving to, as Nicolás said, to some things that we are going to be building in a proactive human way. And there's going to be agents that's going to be working for us 7x24 at some point. Some are already doing that. We are working on that. That's still imperfect, we know, but that's where the software development is going. It's going towards building through a new kind of collective intelligence. A collective intelligence that combines people, robots, and agents. And that's also a little bit of what's coming for what we have to build. Every time you kind of put those things together. When I was looking at what happened a few weeks back of new protocols for agents to be able to shop autonomously, then it comes together with, for example, a client. We could then use a ChatGPT and connect it to a merchant and to a payment provider to make purchases for us in some way. Do you remember how we used to talk about the concept of a super app? Well, ChatGPT and all the major chat clients are going to evolve and transform into fully integrated, intelligent super apps. That means we have new channels IN, which we are able to sell our products. If I'm a retailer, the game changed. I know that I'm going to have to sell on GPT chat, in the cloud, in Gemini, in Microsoft. So on the one hand, I think that a great transformation is going to be about experiences. Today, like every technological wave, at the beginning, we are trying to use it more than anything else in processes that optimize what we were already doing, what we already knew how to do. But the truth is that what LLMs are not going to help me is to build new experiences, is in building the new experiences. The truth is that the last protocols were built by humans. The last successful interfaces were built by humans. Why is that? Because LLMs are very good at building the things we already know how to do. They know how to translate what we already did, not what's coming. So the truth is that there is a whole world of experiences to build. And on the other hand, what is going to happen sooner rather than later is the connection to the physical world. The connection with the physical world in this agentic era, which we're already experiencing today, so is happening behind a chat, behind a hidden interface, behind processes, behind a screen. It doesn't matter, whatever screen it may be. We're going to see it more and more behind the scenes or as the heart of different robots. And when I say robots, I don't just mean humanoids, I mean all kinds of robotics. High-cost robotics, low-cost, medium-cost providers, that really connects artificial intelligence with real data. So this connects stack of things that we had talked about, IoT at another time, robotics, agentics. That's what I envision. A new powerful wave of even greater technological complexity coming soon for building advanced enterprise systems. Because we are really seeing that we are, in many cases, gradually eliminating the screens in the middle entirely. Therefore, the truth is that vibe coding a form is of little importance because the forms will no longer exist. So just as we had the era of apps and we said that everything was an app, now surely everything is an agent. It says that's the agent that's doing this. Let's go create real solutions that solve things and new experiences. I want an experience that does such and such. I want an experience that changes this, that changes my business. I don't want an agent. Nobody wants an agent for sure. What you want is to positively impact your business.
So, in summary, GeneXus Next is a brand new cross-platform IDE available on Windows, Mac, and Linux.
And dark mode.
Dark mode, don't forget.
That's Federico's favorite. It also includes Nexa, an agent for developers. It is a new way to build agentic systems, all in a controlled and secure environment. So, the last thing left is to invite customers to try GeneXus Next. Stay tuned because we'll be releasing a lot of content starting tomorrow and continuing through December, leading up to the Globant Converge event, where we'll have an exclusive day fully dedicated to platforms. And finally, continue tomorrow where you will see Gonzalo Echagüe's webinar, where we will show GeneXus Next in action. So thank you very much, and I will leave you with Nicolás.
Well, my friends, I want to end this GeneXus Next launch presentation with the same question I started it with. What for? In this case, what is the GeneXus community going to use GeneXus Next for? The answer is very short. At least for me, what I'd really like is for them to use it so that the client companies within the GeneXus community can adopt AI as quickly and efficiently as possible. This is an opportunity that is now. My recommendation is download GeneXus Next as soon as possible, start using it and gaining hands-on experience in creating intelligent agents. Get experience in creating agentic solutions, but above all, I want you to have as much fun as I've had using it these past few days. Thank you very much.